you wanted to announce today, thank you again for joining us. Our session today is a panel discussion on innovation in advanced products. We have a couple Yakima Chief Hop representatives as well as a few brewers. So I'm going to pass it back on over to you guys and take it away.
Hey, good evening, everyone, or good morning for you. It's my evening. This is Blaze Rude from Yakima Chief Hops. I am Director of Key Accounts and Brewing Innovation here. James invited me to join him and the other Down Under folks to talk a little bit about brewing with different products, and why we do what we do on an innovations front, and also how it works with the craft industry. So I prepared a little PowerPoint today. But first, I'd like to pass off to James to introduce the panel that we're going to have and the attendees that we have joining us today.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. So it's James here from Yakima Chief Hops, and I'm the regional sales manager based down here in Australia and New Zealand. So I've got a few panelists with us today from across both Australia and New Zealand, both brewers and our distributor, Cryo Hops. So if I can shoot around the room and get everyone to introduce themselves, kick off with Pete.
Here we go. Hi, I'm Pete Gillespie, founder and brewer, one of the founders and brewer from Garage Project in Wellington, New Zealand. How much detail do you want?
Probably enough.
I like long walks on the beach. Yeah. Garage Project's been going for about nine years. Before that, I started brewing in England, brewed at Breakspears, Hepworth & Co., brewed in Australia at the Malt Shovel Brewery before moving to New Zealand, back to New Zealand to start the Garage Project. There you go.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Pete. Ash?
G'day there. My name's Asher Hall. I'm the head brewer at Stomping Ground Brewery in Melbourne, in Collingwood. The brewery's been open since 2016. We've got a pretty well-known in Melbourne beer hall, big old beer hall, and a brewery behind that. So the brewery's grown pretty successfully over the last 4 years. Obviously this year is going to be a bit of a dip, but I came down from Wollongong, which is in New South Wales, and was brewing at Illawarra Brewing Co. there, which was formerly Five Islands Brewing Co. But yeah, that's it.
Beautiful. Thanks for that, Ash.
Beer too. It's very good beer.
And Rich?
Yeah, g'day. I'm Richard Watkins from Bespoke Brewing Company. I think I'm the longest serving craft brewer in Australia, still brewing at the moment. Been brewing for 25 years, started in 1994. I went through and studied to be an actuary, then science, then mining engineering, and finally into brewing. And Bespoke's now been going for 6 years, and we've just cracked over the 2.5 million litre mark. So cheers.
Beautiful. Thanks for that, Rich. And over to Mr. Burridge from Cryo Malt.
G'day everybody. Yeah, John Burridge, sales manager for Cryo Malt, Yakima Chief in Australia and New Zealand. Haven't been in the industry as long as Richard, only about half as long. I'm based down in Tasmania, and yeah, it's a pleasure to be on board.
Beautiful. Thanks for that, fellas. Well, we might as well get into the presentation. So over to you, Blaze.
All right. Let's see here. So innovation in advanced products. Really what I decided to go with today was really craft oriented. So not going to get it too into like further downstream products, but mostly talking about hop products, what you use, most craft brewers, and then a couple of newer products that we have, and even some that are actually older but newer to craft brewers. So all right, I always like to start my talks when I talk about hops by showing up a close-up picture of a hop cone. If you look on the left of the screen, you're going to see a cross section of a hop cone. So this is important to look at because it kind of shows you what and where different things are inside of the hop. And in the middle, you see what's called the strig or a stem, and that's really kind of what the middle of the flower is. And surrounding that is these little tiny yellow glands. They're actually lupulin glands, and you can see a close-up of that on the top right of the screen. Those are important because they contain most of the aromatic and a lot of the flavor compounds in the hop, and also pretty much all of the alpha as well. So it's important because it contains everything that most brewers are after. And then surrounding that is the leafy fraction, which also adds flavor of its own and aroma of its own. But really, it kind of protects those lupulin glands. That's how we breed the hops. They grow and they protect, and we pick them at certain times based on how ripe they are and keeping that lupulin in great condition. So, all right, just a little lineup of products. I forgot to put much about fresh hops in my presentation, but we should talk about innovative brewing methods with those. But we'll get to that later with the team and see what they all think. But really, product lineup, we start with fresh hops. Those are picked, the vines are picked in the field, and they go to a picking machine, get kiln dried and pressed into bales. That's where you get to the whole leaf hop. And then the whole leaf hops come to us in bales, to Yakima Chief. And from there, we make all sorts of different things. We make T90 pellets, which are kind of industry standard that most brewers do use, craft and macro. Then we also make Cryo Hops, which mostly are used by the craft industry. And the offshoot of that is American Noble, which is kind of a noble-ish lower alpha alternative for brewers that don't want to add a whole lot of bitterness but want some flavor and aroma. We do take T90 pellets and make further downstream products, including CO2 hop extract, ISO, Tetra, Ike, a bunch of different things that are more macro oriented. All right, so what are cryo hops and why are they important? Well, they are the concentrated lupulin. So we're taking we're after those little glands that are surrounding the stem that have most of the aromatics and the bittering compounds in them, most of the resins. Basically what we do is we separate the whole leaf hop cones at really low temperature. So we freeze them with liquid nitrogen, and then we shatter them and put them through a separation step. And that gets the different compounds in the different places. So we're kind of separating that stem, that leaf material from the lupulin glands as best as we can. And really, I'll make a couple notes on this. So cryo hops, I was involved when we first started down the path of really thinking about making this commercial product. And really, it came from the idea of making like this concentrated hop keef is how I thought of it. Something that was really pure. And really when I was a brewer, I still brew, but back when I brewed every day, I was getting driven crazy by brewing these big IPAs and how I would hop them and dry hop them. If I got over a certain threshold, I'd start to enter this kind of earthy, grassy, vegetal place that I didn't like. So I was really after a superior aromatic focused product, mostly for dry hopping. So process-wise, like I said, take the baled hops. They go through a cleaning process, pretty much the same as our T90 plants. Basically, we're separating sticks, rocks, anything that gets in the bale, which the growers have took a lot of time and money to get their facilities as good as possible. But we still do encounter some stem, some chunks of vine, different things in there. So go through the cleaning process. Then, like I mentioned earlier, we kind of have a freeze step, a milling step, and then a separation step, and finish that off with really nice nitrogen flushed packaging through our packaging machine. So like I was saying, superior aroma, that's what the focus was when we created it. Trying to enhance like lupulin preservation. And what I'm saying there is basically what we're doing is the whole process really occurs in a nitrogen atmosphere, not with oxygen involved. So basically, as soon as we expose the lupulin glands, they are already in nitrogen, and they go that way all the way through pelleting, and then are packed in nitrogen as well. It's important because once oxygen exposes them, you start to get cheesy aged aromas, and we do our best to keep the aroma as pure as possible. Temperature control is also a big thing. That's another big risk for hops, is if you get them too hot in the processing, you're going to degrade them. And for some brewers, it's really helped consistent small particle size, just depending on where you use them. If you were having issues plugging up heat exchangers or whatnot, cryo using the right place of the process, you know, you're going to expect a smaller particle size, and with that probably less plug ups. Increased yields. Now this is one that wasn't in the original plan. We didn't really think about this until we started brewing with our test products, and really the alpha versus the whole leaf and T90s is about double, not quite double. Oil's usually about double or a little bit more. So what you can do is use about half as much to get similar aroma intensity. Although I want to ask the brewers on the panel here later where their experiences with that. We sent out a bunch of surveys early on, and that's kind of where we landed, was the 50% mark usage. So if you use 1 kilo of T90 pellets for dry hopping, or 1 kilo per hectoliter, call it that, you could use half kilo per hectoliter of cryo and get a similar intensity. All that said, recipe wise, we should talk about that in the panel, because I do like to keep some T90 and some vegetable material around just for balance of flavors. So the main benefits I've already covered, but I'll highlight them again. Increased yields, and when I'm talking about yields is less liquid down the drain, because you have less hop trub in all the different parts of the process. You can use cryo hot side, you can use it cold side for dry hopping, and use less material and have more beer. And environmentally, there's some impacts there if you're putting less down the drain. My main benefit that I was after, and that what I use it for, is reduced vegetal and polyphenol flavor. Again, I like to balance how much is in my beers, kind of get that balance, I call it a throat hit, where the beer tastes balanced, but not over the top with earthy, grassy vegetal flavor. So that's really how I use it. All right, next product I'm gonna talk about real quick, CO2 hop extract. Pretty simple process, really. Use high pressure CO2, not even high pressure, it's actually a pressure range. It's on the next slide, but I'll get to that. We basically put hops in a high pressure vessel, pump in CO2, and then separate the leafy, grassy material and get all the oil and resin in one place and pump that. So it's actually a liquid at a little warmer temperature. It gets a little bit solid when it cools down. What I really like about this product is it's really like, it adds no trub to your kettle. Flip side is you can't really use it cold side at all. I haven't tried a whole lot, but when I have it, it's not been successful. I really like to boil it myself. 10 minutes, or really at the very end of boil, I can get it in there and get it to dissolve, but you really need some heat involved. So with that, it's good for flavor and aroma like you would use for a kettle hop, but not feasible when it comes to dry hopping. So there's a graph that shows kind of where and why we extract what we do. We use supercritical CO2. So what that is CO2 that's at a pressure and temperature range. You can see it on the graph. You can see where it's solid, it's gas, and then you got kind of this kind of liquid supercritical point there, and it just works really well to get resins and oils separated from the vegetal material, and our yields go up, and we're very efficient with it. So basically we separate the resin and the oil, get it all in one place, pump it out of the tank, discard. We actually send the vegetal material, it gets repelleted, sent out for cattle feed. There's a little bit of protein in there and whatnot, but really we take all the resin and the oils and we package them up. For large brewers, they go into big drums. For small brewers, we custom pack into small tins. For perspective, I'd say one of the smallest tins that we sell are 150 GMA. For a higher alpha hop, that's equivalent to about 1 kilo of T90 pellets in terms of how much alpha is in there. So if you're looking to have some fun and play with some varietal specific extract, that's how I would recommend dosing it. So yeah, one small tin's about 1 kilo when you're talking extract versus T90 pellets. Benefits of CO2 hop extract is really you're getting all the material that degrades, all that leafy material out of the equation. So you have a really shelf stable product. I mean, you can store it for many, many years without any degradation. packaged in these food grade tins. There's CO2 in the process too. So really there's just not much that really goes wrong with it as it ages. So if they were good pellets that made the extract's going to be good for a very long time. We list 3 or 5 year shelf life, depending on what temperature you keep them at. If you keep them cold, we list 5 year shelf life. That said, we've tracked different lots. The initial batch, I believe, is still down in Sunnyside, the first run we did, and I mean, it's going on 20 years now. And I think the alphas went from 60% down to about 54. So it's very, very stable. So we're going to start the panel. So we'll see where things go. I did want to ask John, because I've been talking to him a bit over the past few months, just kind of about where the industries went. And John, I wanted to lead off with you, just kind of what have you seen in terms of kind of like brewers' perspective and brewer attitude and openness to using advanced products? And that can be cryo hops, that can be extract, that can be other things. Wanted to hear from you and what you've seen from the cryo team.
Yeah, thanks for that, Blaze. Great presentation. Look, over the years, the downstream products and innovation in this department has grown significantly. Obviously, everyone remembers back to T45 and things like that. And a lot of the extract products we found we're using were fundamentally in the macro space. We are starting to see that shift towards the smaller craft brewers and more experimentation and usage of these products. One of the big, when cryo hit the market, it really hit the sweet spot. You know, it's perfectly aligned to craft brewers from, you know, down to 50 litres up to 5 million litres. It's an even greater. It's a phenomenal product, and I think that has really been a game changer in the market. We've seen a much higher uptake in the cryo world than we have in some of the extract products. Yeah, so I think along with that, beer styles and the current changing market of what beer styles are in popularity at the time, it also has an impact on what downstream products can be utilised. Also where, which the brewers will be able to better answer than myself, where these downstream products are getting used. You know, traditionally, cryo could be just used for dry hops, but we're starting to see more experimentation with not just in kettle, but I heard of some guys putting it in their mash just recently. That was pretty exciting. So not only new products and how they fit to the market, but where they get used in the brewery is exciting.
That's an expensive mash.
Yeah.
Yeah, really. What were they trying to get out of that?
It was part of, it's just a hop beer that they've always done. They always put some in the mash. They believe, you know, they openly admit they're not getting much out of it, but I suppose some of the earthy nature would come through. It baffled me, but hey, there's a lot of experimentation going. I had reverse scenario. A brewery in South Australia actually did a complete beer and dry hopped with CO2 extract. Again, not much getting picked up late, but happy to experiment in the realms. And that's, I suppose, to say that there's a lot of experimentation going on with these products in probably non-conformed ways.
Mm.
Yeah, I've used a lot of cryo, that separated lupulin. Maybe they know something I don't. I probably wouldn't use it in the mash, but I focus it myself on Whirlpool dry hop primarily. It works fine for bittering, but again, I maybe use extract for that to be the most efficient. Well, I'd like to lead that into our next question here for the panel is, what are your experience brewing with cryo hops? I got a couple bullets on there about flavor and aroma, recipe formulation, yield implications, processing efficiency regarding like tank residence time, VDK, that sort of thing. So I'd like to hear how you brewers down under have been using cryo, if you have.
Yeah, I'll happily start off there if you want. Sorry about the bashing and crashing in the background. So we came over. I met you, Blaze. Rich and I came over with Vintani guys many years ago. I think I'd actually met you before that at the brewery here in Melbourne. But I started using it just prior to that trip. I tried it in a beer, and I probably didn't get what I should have out of it. But then after that trip, we came back and we did a beer called the Hop Stomper, which we're still doing now. And that was a name that we came up with on the trip after we'd been in Germany, and we went to the hop factory, the hop museum, and they had a picture of a guy who used to be the people who used to push the hops into the bales instead of a mechanical press, and they translated it to Hop Stomper. So we came back for that, trying to, from the experience, I wanted to try and get as much hop flavour in the beer as possible, and use a variety of different products which we'd seen and spoken with YCH about on that trip. So I haven't changed that recipe since then. The only thing I've done is started a 0-day dry hop at the suggestion of one Rich Watkins up there in the corner. But otherwise that beer hasn't changed in all that time, and it's a pretty successful beer. And we use Resonate for bittering. Nothing really throughout the boil, and then just whirlpool with cryo, and then dry hop with T90s. And I did try dry hopping with the cryo in another beer, and I personally didn't really like the result. I prefer the T90s, but what we lose in terms of dry hopping volume with the T90s, we pick up out of the whirlpool and the kettle with using the Resonate and the cryo. So the volumes on that beer tend to be a lot better than, say, if we just use straight T90s in another IPA that we do.
My turn?
Yep. Far away, Pete.
Yeah, similar kind of experience. I mean, it's interesting. Joss and I, it was Joss's idea, I think back in, might have been 2016, did an experiment making hop hash using exactly the same technique. So we got liquid nitrogen and froze whole cone hops, then buzzed them in a kind of like a food processor, and then found stuff on the internet on how to make hash, because of course we wouldn't know anything about that. But managed to find some stuff where you make basically a kind of a mesh screen and shake the product through that. So there's a video of us, I think, on YouTube acting like wankers dressed up as Breaking Bad and making this stuff. But we managed to get basically the same thing, like just the lupulin. And we made a fair bit of it and used it in a beer for a beer festival, like a hop hash beer. And I used an absurd amount of it, I felt. But the thing that was remarkable was, I mean, we used it for everything in the beer. So we used it for bitterness, for whirlpool, for dry hopping. And the thing that struck me was I was expecting this giant beer, and what we got was incredibly subtle, really delicate, despite using all of that. And I think, I mean, it was really interesting to see what happens when you remove that plant component from the process. And so when cryo came along, I mean, we jumped on it. We've made a beer that uses only cryo, and it's really fun. But I do feel, I mean, these products are fantastic, but I feel like they're fantastic at elevating a beer just a little bit more. I don't think they're a replacement for the original hop products, for T90, for whole cone, but they allow you to create extra notes and do different things. So I think any brewer who hasn't used them definitely should, but do think of them as something that you use on top of the hops that you already have. We use it a lot in whirlpool, like Asher did. I really like it. I mean, obviously we get a much greater yield, so we can get fantastic aroma out of the whirlpool without losing all of our beer in the kind of that sludgy mess at the bottom, which is we like. And I feel like it creates a really lovely, soft, rounded aromatic base for you then to build upon. A lot of the hazies we're doing now, we're playing around a lot with cryo in the whirlpool. Like Asher, I've tried using entirely cryo for dry hop, and I find it, again, it's a little lacking. I like to use it, but mix it up with T90, so you get elements of that kind of plant material, which maybe you need a little touch of that. of the polyphenols and things. But then add on top. That's probably enough of me waffling, eh? I should probably shut up and let someone else talk.
We enjoy it, Pete. Thank you.
And we also use a lot of hop extract. Again, much better yields off it. And the quality of bitterness as well. I mean, we really love it. And you can play around using different varietals. We use a lot of Simcoe hop extract at the beginning of the boil. It's great. Just using those little 150 cans.
I'd agree with that.
Also...
Sorry.
No,
I was
go on.
going to say the same thing on all our IPAs. We use the extract, and it's fantastic. The difference in bitterness is just so much cleaner and brighter. And I find it doesn't come across as astringent, even though the IBUs are much higher from using it. Well, in our case, anyway. Yeah, it's great.
I'm going to say part of that, I think, guys, is there's really not much oxidized alpha in there. So the perceived bitterness is really actual bitterness versus, oxidized compounds that seem harsher and astringent. So I'd say you're much better off, in my opinion, using quality extract versus, older high alpha hops that have degraded a little bit. It's a good spot to trickle some of those in bitterness, but man, it's not the same quality of bitterness you're talking about. I like that smooth hit that then goes away myself. I don't like it to linger too much. So I'm going to agree with you. Our standard recipe on the little brewery or pilot brewery in Yakima is Simcoe extract for bittering, and then a mix of T90 and cryo for the whirlpool, and then also a mix in the dry hop. We found that you got to have a minimum amount of like T90 in there and vegetable material to get that kind of roundness and throat hit and balance to the beer. And if you take all that out and you just cryo and extract, you're going to be missing something. So that's taken a lot of brewing, a lot of trials, but I firmly believe that. I would say I would like to see about for a highly hopped IPA, about a half kilo per hectoliter of T90 or leaf somewhere in the process, and then you can supplement most of the rest with cryo and extract, and at least in my experience, my taste.
Yeah, I guess I've got similar but also different views there, because I find it's also very varietal specific as well. So some varietals certainly some varietals of cryo, that is, need more T90 than others. I also, part of our process is that we do add some T90s at the start of fermentation as well. And what we find there is that those T90s hang around, and the way we do our dry hopping using a hop cannon and recirculating our fermenter through that, does bring those T90s back up into solution and mix with the cryo that we add. So our biggest selling beer is Crankshaft, where we use about 80 kilos of cryo per 100 hectolitres. I got that right? I think I have. Yep. So that's 0.8 per hectolitre, something like that. And we find there that we're adding all T90s at the start of fermentation, and then just all cryo in our dry hop, 7-day dry hop. But because the T90 is already in there and the cryo is going in, it does work really well together. But those varieties are Citra and Equinite. We've also used a bit of Simcoe and Centennial Type, but I find that Citra and Equinite don't need as much, for me, T90 involvement, and I reckon we get a lot more of that like candy-like character from not using as much T90. Whereas on another IPA we do, which is our Sprocket, which we're using Mosaic, all Mosaic cryo in the dry hop, and then Mosaic T90 in early fermentation, along with some Amarillo, which I hope turns into cryo at some point, because it'd be good to get some Amarillo cryo. And also a local hop called Galaxy we use in our... I find that the Mosaic really does need more T90. So having the Galaxy and the Amarillo there as T90s in the dry hop really accentuates the Mosaic cryo character. I think if you tried to make a beer with Mosaic cryo straight and then compared it to a beer with Mosaic T90 straight, they'd be nearly two different beers. You'd even wonder if they came from the same brewery. There'd be that much difference for me in those varietals. So to sum up, I sort of tend to agree, like you need a bit of T90, but there is also a varietal specific component there with some different cryos.
Yeah, Rich, thanks. I actually, that's one thing I wanted to bring up. When you're talking like active fermentation, dry hopping, I didn't used to be a fan myself personally as a brewer of dry hopping twice. Like a lot of brewers have done that, but I just found I was extending how much tank time my beers were hanging in there with yeast and had some other issues. So I think kind of dry hopping with T90 first, like you are, you're getting that vegetal material, the and which has most of the enzymatic material that's going to start breaking down some of those unfermentables, right? You're getting
That's
that
right. You
early.
start that hop creep early. So that's
Yeah.
another reason for doing it. It's two parts, is getting the hop creep going early, because the sooner you get the hop creep going, the sooner it's going to stop, which is a good thing, especially when you're packaging your beer. But also adding that leaf component early too.
Yeah, I found the cryo addition that you're doing second is probably less prone to breaking down those sugars, right? I mean, that's in my experience. That's what I found too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one more note: Amarillo cryo is just fine. We got some for you if you need. So holler at us. Amarillo, Centennial, Cascade, they cryo quite well. And if you're looking to get the fruity, citrusy, nice components out of there and reduce the grassiness, they could be a nice tool to have in your toolbox there. So,
Yeah, awesome. Good to hear.
Yeah. I don't know if James and John have any down there, but they can. We can work that out.
We do.
Okay.
So I'm ready to go, Rich.
Good.
Yeah, right on. Well, what other did I have here? Talking recipe formulation and talked about yields. It sounds like different brewers use cryo different places based on probably their brew system and their process. I did want to bring up that processing efficiency piece. When it sounds like if you're doing a lot of T90 with the cryo and dry hop, and you're dry hopping at one time, it's probably a similar aging to other beers that don't have cryo. But I found if you're using a lot more cryo than T90 in the dry hop, I'm able to get that VDK to subside a lot faster. I'd say 4 days compared to 6 days. Healthy use with my process. But I have been experimenting with dry hopping a little earlier. I always dry hop kind of at the tail end of fermentation. So why don't we talk dry hopping? How do you all dry hop? And how long? What temperature? What have you played around with that hasn't worked? I mean, Asher, I haven't heard much from you. Why don't you tell us what you do there?
Yeah, okay, cool. So I used to solely dry hop warm, and I had 2 stages. I'd always do it warm at the end of ferment, and then do a cold stage as well. But obviously the hop creep, when we started getting into package, became a bit of a worry, and that extended de-rest as well, which we wanted to try and reduce. And so, and again, at the suggestion of Rich, who I've brewed a couple of collabs with, we were always doing it, and it just, in hindsight, should have been doing it forever. But yeah, that's one thing that we do on all our hoppy beers is dry hop, with the exception of some lagers that we do. We dry hop 0 day, and then at about 7 days, and it's only really 2 dry hops now, the DDH, if you will, but and only T90s. So I mean, I tried a couple of times with cryo dry hopping, and I personally didn't like it. But everything we do, we've got a hop cannon. We haven't started using it as yet for hops. We use it for fruit mainly, and I've used it for wet hops one time. That was pretty interesting. But yeah, it's just T90 straight in the top of the tank. The tanks aren't huge. We've got 65 hect tanks, and they're quite fat, so we get a pretty good roll. If you add the hops at the end of ferment, they mix up pretty well. The only issue we have at our brewery is that the roof is pretty close to the top of the tanks, and although we've got solar panels on top of that roof, we thought that was going to sort of add a layer of insulation. It actually keeps the roof bloody hotter. So one of our problems is that when we dry hop and you've got all the hops at that first sort of day after dry hopping on the second day, and they all, they float to the surface and foam up. We've noticed that in summer our beers aren't as bright and aren't as fresh when we dry hop, because they're getting just heated up way too much. I mean, the top of the tank, the steel on top of the tank can be 35, 40 degrees, which is not great. So that's what we got and we've only just got the hop cannon. That's what we got the hop cannon for, so we can recirculate it a bit better. when we do have those really hot days to try and get the hops back down in the liquid and not degrading up in the top of the tank.
When you dry hop, do you have pressure on the tank after you canning them in there, or what's your process with pressure?
Yeah, so we apply pressure. So we've got positive pressure as we're dry hopping, so as we're throwing in. But I mean, the beer's usually got enough CO2 that it's blowing out a fair bit anyhow. But we kind of we lock it off for, maybe 5 minutes, a couple of lots of 5 minutes, just let the pressure build up and then blow it off. And then I leave the tank open. So like not open, but through the airlock, I leave it not under pressure for a couple of days. And then we start doing diastyle tests and chill from there. But I played around early on with locking it up and letting the pressure build up. But for whatever reason, I don't know why the DOs didn't seem as good and the beer didn't seem as bright. So I'm happy to just let it sit now without pressure on top.
I have found that adding some pressure helps those floating hops start to go down. But that said, I don't have solar panels on top of the tanks that I'm seeing this happen. So
yeah, okay.
Usually a few pounds of pressure, which I add that when I'm going to drop yeast an hour or two before, especially the warm harvest, it helps them get down to the bottom. I found a similar effect with hops, especially if you get a lot that seems to float a little bit more than others. But again, not a really hot top to the tank, just kind of consistent. So
I think one of the other fears is that I don't know why, whether it's valid, but we tend to find the de-rest is extended if there's pressure on the tank as well. For whatever reason, the yeast maybe can't metabolize the diacetyls easily, but I'm certainly willing to give that a go and then, just do the check, take the pressure off, get up a ladder and have a look. We'll give it a go this summer.
Yeah, I got a sight glass up there and see what happens.
Yeah, well, that too.
We do it a bit differently. So we'll measure the CO2 coming out of the tank on day 5 and make sure that our oxygen levels are low. And generally, because our tanks are quite full during ferment, it doesn't take much to remove any oxygen in the headspace at the top of the fermenter. So we'll generally, what we'll do is measure day 5 and either lock up the tank day 5 or lock up the tank day 6 if we feel we need another day. And then we'll dry hop on day 7, generally starting at 1 bar. And by the time we actually finish dry hopping, we've probably got 2 bar in the fermenter because we've had to, push all that beer that's in the hop cannon through back into the tank. So we use a hop cannon with a candle in it, and we push all those hops through the candle, which breaks them up into really small particles, and then recirculate that fermenter for 2 to 3 hours, depending on the hop charge in the hop cannon. And we find we get really good results because all those hop pellets, whether they're T90s or cryo, break up into really small particles. So you get really good surface area and real good sort of extraction with that recirculation. Obviously, key part being the low oxygen at the start, because there's no point recirculating if you're still got oxygen in the headspace. And also then just part of that recirculating helps to bring that vegetal character from the T90s earlier in ferment back into solution and help blending with the cryo to create our hop profile that we want. So we'll generally start at 1 bar and finish at 2 bar, and we then leave the tank locked up at 2 bar and bleeding off slightly because the hop creep will go for a couple of days, and then generally on the 9th day we're on chill. So then we're the pressure's dropping based on chilling, and away we go.
Sounds like unanimous. Most of us dry hop warm. Pete, how about you? What temperature are you dry hopping at?
We've done all sorts of things. I wish I was more confident. I think the more I learn about hops, the less I feel I know. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I used to be really confident about how to dry hop things, and now I don't know. We just do everything. We used to do multiple dry hops. One kind of, as the ferment started to arrest towards the end. So depending on what the beer, so I wouldn't give it a day. I'd just say as the ferment starts to just flatline. And then we'd do another one sort of after it went on chill. We've stopped that. We then went to single dry hops because we felt like we tried both and one single dry hop was better. But then now we've started mucking around, like throwing it in during the ferment. So there's a bit more interaction with the yeast, which is a very interesting thing to do. Dry hopping right at the beginning, like you, Asher and Richard, which makes it a little bit tricky. We've found just in terms of yeast harvesting when we do cone to cone pitching, it's a bit of a bugger. So sometimes we regret being silly and shoving it in at the beginning. But gosh, it's just fascinating. I almost feel like there isn't one correct way to do it. I just did a collab with an awesome brewery in the States called Green Cheek. I don't know if you know them, but they were talking about their method, which I don't know, maybe I shouldn't be disclosing this, but they basically, wait till the end of the ferment, yeast off, try and get rid of as much yeast as possible, then dry hop. And they dry hop and then just try and get it off the bottom as much as possible. We hold our dry hop for about 3 days and rouse it with CO2. So we're under pressure and we just tickle a little bit of CO2 in gently to just keep it roused up. But they're whack it in 1 day and just try and get it off straight away. And then they hit it again the next day. And again, they're just yeasting off and hopping off. And the collab we did with them was absolutely fucking fantastic. So, you think you know something, you think you've got it all locked down, and then you discover that there's lots of other ways of doing it and you're suddenly not so sure. So yeah, I wish I could be more sure. But that's kind of fun, isn't it? There's always new ways of doing it.
That's why we're talking innovation. It's not just product innovation, man. That's why we got the brewers on here talking about brewing innovations. What do you do? What have you seen over the years? What's changed? What hasn't changed? It's pretty wild. I'm with you. I used to have a set method at my old brewery. End of ferment, like most activities stopped. Warm still, so about 20 C. Drop the yeast out of there. I mean, at least the cone, dry hop, browse, wait 5-6 days, look at VDK and diacetyl, and then crash. But now, I don't know, man. I like dry hopping with something a little earlier to get that breakdown going, just like Rich is talking about. So yeah, it makes the yeast harvesting, especially if you're like a pub brewer trying to harvest tank to tank, or even not a pub brewer, but that's what I was, where I'd go tank to tank and manage my yeast supply for many generations. But I never liked having dry hops in there, so it's pretty wild.
So I reckon there's a good test you can do, because every brewery's different. Every brewery has different hopping regimes, but also quantities, but also tank geometry and times and different yeasts. And some yeast flocculate more, some don't. Different protein levels from the malt coming through to fermenter as well. So there's so many variables. But I reckon one thing that you can do to really make sure that you're getting all those oils out of your hops is it sounds silly, but it does work, is when you're trubbing off after you've dry hopped, if that trubbing off really does have a lot of aroma in it, then you haven't taken all that aroma out of the hops. So I remember years ago when I was at the small little brew pub, we used to take a bit of, ferment a bit of wort separately to the fermenter. And then if we could dry hop the separate fermenter with a bit of the trub and have a good hop aroma or good flavour in the beer, that means our dry hopping isn't working, because we're putting all our dry hops down the drain. We're putting all those oils and flavour down the drain. So that's why the way we do it now with the recirculating the fermenter minimises the amount of aroma and flavour, I believe, going down the drain when you're trubbing off the fermenter. And I think everyone's different, and everyone will have their own way. But if you're trubbing off the beer before you go to centrifuge or before you go to bright tank, and you're getting that great hop aroma going down the drain, I reckon it's worth tweaking something to minimise that for sure.
I'm going to chime in and say aging cold beer on the trub in the cone, in my opinion, doesn't give me the flavors I want. That said, I like to let it dry hop warm. We had a question come in. This is related here, Rich. It's from Josh Lindsay, saying Scott Janish and Spencer T talked a couple nights ago about diminishing returns after 24 hours. I'm going to respectfully disagree based on my sensory that said, I don't like to crash a beer and let it sit on the hops. I like to dump the hops when I crash. I want to wait till I've got most of the aroma out of them, the decay subsided, then I dump. And then I crash, like pretty much at the same time. And then I'll dump again and again. I feel like at colder temperatures, earthy, woody, grassy flavors start to come out. And that's not what I want in my beer. But if you want that in your beer, by all means, leave it in there, right?
Yeah, well, we're definitely doing a big trub off before we even dry hop to get rid of some of that 0 day. Then we're dry hopping, and then we're cooling every single beer we dry hop. We're cooling after 48 hours, absolute maximum, and that's at 18 degrees. So we'll dry hop at 18 degrees, and we'll cool after 48 hours without fail. It's all about timing your dry hopping so that you know that hop creep is done after 48 hours, because as you just said, Blaze, I personally don't want to leave the beer on the hops longer than 48 hours. And then after that, we're on chill for like maybe 1.5 to 2 days, and then we're straight into the centrifuge. The sooner, I believe, you can get the hops away from the beer, especially on the cold side, the better. I've never had any good experiences keeping the beer on the hops for an extended period of time cold.
It's amazing to me to talk to brewers like you guys and hear how you do it now. For brewers out there that are chimed in, I don't recommend dry hopping for 48 hours unless you've already dry hopped like Rich has early on, because you're going to get hop creep and then you're going to crash and you're going to have unfermentables in your beer, which if you package or care about diacetyl or the beer gets warm, a lot of things can happen if there's unfermentables in there. So I'd be real wary of that. And I usually find that you can see it analytically after about 2 days sitting on hops, and the yeast got a little work to do to get rid of it. But if, like Rich does, you do it early and then another, sprinkle in some extra at the end, you kind of get a spectrum of different hop flavor, I would say. And I do like that method. And if I was brewing for production, that would probably be a consideration I'd take in for sure. When you dry hop day 0, Rich, you just add them to the tank and knock out onto them, or what do you do?
Yeah, we just literally put them in the toppers. We're double brewing into a fermenter. So we're adding all our 0 day hops as we add the yeast from the first brew, and then the second brew just comes in and mixes it all up again. We've got our, we worked out our pale ale. We literally only 0 day dry hop. We don't actually add any hops on the 7th day, and we're using Equinox and Mosaic T90s in that, and it's still got a nice hop aroma with only dry hopping on the first day. We're generally adding quite a bit though too, so that's our pale ale probably we're adding 60-70 kilos per 100 hec on that day. So and then even with our other IPAs, we're probably adding 40 kilos at a time as well. So we're adding a decent amount. It's not just a sprinkling. It's a decent amount of T90 to start that. I reckon the hop creep really affects hop flavor and hop aroma. And the sooner you get those compounds all converted and fermented, and you want to be also working out, for me, I reckon this makes a difference. People may disagree, but for me personally, I reckon making sure that your gravity, finishing gravity is quite low when you start to dry hop as well. So you don't dry hop too early because you're obviously going to lose a lot of aromas through final fermentation. But it's a timing thing, timing that fermentation closing down to dry hopping, and then knowing that you've already started the hop creep a lot earlier, I think for me makes a fairly big difference. Look, there's heaps of variables, so plenty of different ways to do it, but start the hop creep early, make sure your terminal gravity is quite low, then dry hop. And for me, don't leave them sitting around for too long, because the grassy vegetal character, if you get any of that in there, that just overpowers for me any of the tropical or citrus characters that you want to try and get in.
All right. Thanks a ton, Rich, for that. It's really insightful. I mean, I guess my takeaway, and I always have this when I talk to a group of brewers, is there's a lot of different ways to do things and brew great beer. And don't be afraid to play around a little bit. And it's pretty interesting. And most brewers I found are pretty collaborative, happy to help and share a little bit of information, just like the crew on this call. So thanks to you guys for that. We got only a few more minutes here. We got a couple questions from the audience that I wanted to bring up and see what everyone thinks here. So this question from Huva: advanced products are consistently being used in the trade. What are your thoughts on embracing and sharing this usage with the end consumer? How do we educate and communicate the benefits and contributions of these products to a consumer? I will chime in because I've been working on this exact thing, because I've always been focused on how do I share this with the brewer? But what about the beer drinker that's driving a lot of the sales that us brewers pay attention to? And, we want to meet that demand and brew good beer to do it. So I've been working on some projects lately to collaborate with brewers, especially during the whole weirdness this year where you can't get out. How do we bring some education to that consumer who's staying in? And really what we've been working on is collaborative brewing projects. I'm working on a project with my old brewery, Old School House, where we're gonna really work on posting some information, getting some collaborative beers brewed, and share that information on how we brewed it, what products we used, and make it really fun. Get that beer in the consumer's hands and then let them look online at what we're doing. We actually do it currently with Bale Breaker, with the In the Loop project, where we use experimental hops in fun, unique ways, get that beer into the market. They sell some, we share some with brewers that we purchase and share. And it's been working pretty good, but that's one thought that's where my minds went to help educate the consumer. And I don't know, the series I'm working on with my old brewery is highlighting some interesting folks in the hop industry that I think a few of the folks on this call have met. So anyway, just something innovative and fun, a project I've been wanting to do. So anybody else have any feedback on how we could do that more as a brewing community?
I mean, we did a series with Plant and Food New Zealand and New Zealand Hops a couple of years ago, taking experimental varieties that were still kind of just towards the end of their production development stage. And we kind of like rushed them through and did sort of single hop beers with these, and released them. And we're very explicit about each one and tried to get, drinker feedback. So we set up a kind of a website where people could give feedback on each experimental. People love it. People love the opportunity to actually dive in and have a say. And I mean, it can be very useful then to be able to feed that back. We fed it all back to New Zealand Hops and Plant and Food, and they get a sense of what people really like rather than just listening to the brewers. We know what we like. It's not always exactly the same thing as what the drinker wants, though, is it?
I agree with Pete there. I think education is very important to the end consumer, and the more educated our end consumer is, the better quality of feedback we get from these consumers. A great example here in Australia is extract. It's always had this stigma about it that only the macros use it, but there's a hell of a lot of benefit to it. And if we can educate that across to the consumer and get them understanding that we use these products because they provide you a better product, I think that's the golden egg that we should be constantly trying to chase.
And it's fun too. You can make it an angle on a beer. I mean, we did a beer called Mecca Hop, which was made entirely with processed ingredients. So we only used dry malt, extract, and processed hops, hop extract, hop aroma oils. So everything had been processed. And we were really explicit about it, and people really enjoyed it. Fascinating beer. It aged like nothing else I've ever seen because everything had been processed. It didn't oxidize in the same way as other products. It was very gracious. It almost turned into a barley wine rather than an IPA over the years. Quite interesting.
Yeah, it's a funny one. I think the difficulty in terms of how you get the message about hop products over is like, it's going to be much harder to do that than say brands. Like there are quite a few breweries who'll just do a single hop beer, and it's easy for the consumer to say, oh, Mosaic, or oh, Galaxy, and that's a word that they can relate to. But then if you start saying T90, or cryo. Cryo perhaps probably has a bit of a better ring to it, but there's a lot of explaining to do to the average punter. And it's not to say that they're stupid or anything like that, but there's a lot that you've got to go through. So you've really got to start from what is a hop, because a lot of people don't even know what a hop is. Like, we have people come through on tours all the time because we've got the brew pub right there, and they'll see you digging out the mash tun and they'll say, "Oh, is that the hops?" You're like, "No." So I don't know. It's an interesting question. And you know, New Zealand might be a better market, or America might be a better market for it. I'm not saying Australia's not good for it, but yeah, it's a tough one to try and get what these products are across to the average punter. I think the name of the product itself is easier, I think, like in terms of Mosaic or Citra or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, our 100% cryo beer is called Bug Powder Dust, and people really took to it. Like we explained, this is 100% cryo. This is this powder, you know. People kind of loved it. It was pretty popular. Interesting. I think it's it's that pointy end, isn't it? If you think about the drinking public as being a triangle, there's a little pointy end at the top, and those guys just foam up at the opportunity, and girls obviously foam up at the opportunity to try something completely brand new, to educate themselves. So yeah, they're definitely keen for that kind of thing. There's obviously the bottom of the pyramid where they don't really give a toss. It just has to be fizzy and cold and delicious.
It can be terribly subjective as well. So, you know, a punter can pick up a beer and see the word cryo on it, and for whatever reason, it might not be to their cup of tea. And then all of a sudden, the whole cryo name could get tarnished in that drinker's opinion. They say, "Oh no, I tried a cryo beer, I don't like that." It might not be the fact of cryo. It might have been the wrong variety or the wrong style of beer. But good old drinkers, they're a funny game.
Yeah, well, we're coming to a close here for our talk tonight, everyone. I wanted to say a special thanks to all the brewers that made the time, James and John as well. Thanks for joining us. I haven't been down under yet, but I cannot wait to visit and see your breweries. I've met most of you up here in person. Pete, maybe, I don't know, but definitely Asher, Rich. Look forward to brewing the next fresh hop with you, maybe next year, hopefully. So we need that. The late night procurement of fresh hops is by far the best, and then brewing them late at night. It's a good time. So we're getting that pilot brewery dialed, guys. You're gonna have a fun time next time you make it up. So thanks again. We're looking out for the hops for you too. I've been in and out of Yakima, going to the field, smelling them. Crop update would say everything looking pretty good. Yields aren't incredible, but quality is looking quite nice. So looking forward to getting more hops for you guys from our growers. They're excited to be a part of what you got going on down there.
And I'll definitely reiterate that thank you to all the brewers here in Australia for jumping on, and big thanks to Blaze for taking some time out of his evening to present to us out here in the Australian New Zealand market. Cheers.
Thanks, Blaze. Thanks,
Cheers, everyone.
Yeah, thanks again, everyone. Huge thank you again. Just reiterate from everyone, you guys were amazing, great content. I know we didn't get to all the questions, but still a lot of great valuable information. So again, just an absolute huge thank you. And just a quick reminder, this was recorded. We will have it up on the Virtual Harvest website and Whova here within the next hour. And I'll also post the slides, the present slides that Blaze went over earlier. Those will be up on both of those as well. Other than that, thank you guys. Have a great night here. Have a great day over down under and wherever you guys are in the world. Just thank you again for joining us on this virtual harvest session, and hope to see you on the next one, which we actually have in another hour with interview with Michael Jordan from Boxing Cats Brewery in China. So come on back. Thanks, guys.
Is
Thanks.